Son, I've been reading your Reddit posts. I stopped attending a class, lied about turning in the final, and still passed. In high school, I forged all of my report cards. Back in high school, I wasn't a great student, and report cards always got me in a lot of trouble. Around the 9th grade, I started intercepting the mail, scanning in my report card on my Windows PC, and then carefully changing all the grades and comments from my teacher using text and numbers that were already on the page. Afterward, I'd very carefully print it out so everything was in the correct spots, then folded it up and put it back in the envelope. At one point in time, my mother was corresponding with one of my teachers via email to track my progress. I went as far as to make an email address that matched my teacher's, just from a different domain, and would delete the real emails from my teacher and forge fake emails that made me look better. Somehow I never got caught. God tier move. Ha, I did that too. Parents were surprised when I was in summer school that summer. Well, obviously you're not dumb, you just hated the system. Everyone's got their own smarts in different ways, and he's able to do a lot of things that most people with good grades on their report cards couldn't do. So, good for him. I threw eggs from the 16th floor of my apartment to maintain peace and quiet. I used to live on the 16th floor of an apartment building. There was a pub on the ground floor, and people would often congregate late at night in the street in front of the pub entrance. This was a hindrance to residents because we would wake up at 1 or 2 in the morning to drunk people talking outside. My apartment had 2 balconies on 2 sides of the building, so I often looked down on people grouping together on both sides of the building. I got fed up with it and decided to drop an egg where a group of people were chatting. They immediately dispersed and I could enjoy my sleep again. I did this on another occasion, and again it worked. I started buying more eggs, and it became a habit that I practiced for about 6 months. No one had a clue it was me, and I even went to the pub and overheard people chatting about eggs being dropped from balconies in the building. Needless to say, I used to maintain peace and quiet by dropping eggs from my balconies. I have nearly gotten water dumped on me outside a bar underneath some apartments. Let's hope it was just water. That would be lol. I moved into an apartment above a bar, then was annoyed it was loud. When the police won't enforce late night noise ordinances, the Eggman restores law and order. I tried to miscarry my baby and hurt her permanently. When I was 15, I got myself pregnant unintentionally. I was a very promiscuous, horny teenager and wasn't exactly safe about it. Sometimes I used condoms, sometimes I didn't. I got really worried when I started experiencing the usual symptoms of morning headaches and nausea and skipped my period. So I took a pregnancy test, and what I feared was true. I was pregnant. I had no idea how to react to this. For one, I was utterly terrified and I wanted to get rid of it. In a way, it felt parasitic, the thing inside me with the power to frick up my life. I have a very Christian parents who would have disowned me for having an abortion, but I knew they would actually love to raise this kid. However, I hated the idea. I had problems with eating at the time and didn't want to gain the pregnancy weight, and I just didn't want a child. I guess I'm making excuses even now. I started a smoking habit very promptly since I heard in science lessons that one of the effects of smoking can be miscarriage. I barely ate at all, and if I did, I threw it up, in hopes of starving it as if I was trying to get rid of a fever. It didn't work. I gave birth to her far too early, and as a result, she is blind. I gave her away and haven't heard from her since. She's 8 by now. My parents were surprisingly supportive, and I got the help I needed for my eating disorder, and I still go to regular therapy. I just had to get it off my chest. And this is why we need better sex ed, along with easy access to contraceptives and an undeniable right to choose. And this is why we need safe abortions. This is an excellent example of why you shouldn't be so strict on your kids that they feel that they can't come to you with anything. I guess I am my brother's keeper. I used to watch over my little brother, who at the time we didn't know had Asperger's, when he was at school. Kids would always pick on him when he came home with bruises. I ditched school, I was in high school and he was in middle school, and snuck onto campus during recess and lunchtime, but always stayed a ways away. I saw some little hat push my brother down and watched as he got back up, picked up his books and walked away, even though the boy was following him and smacking the back of his head. After my brother made it to the classroom, I ran up, grabbed the kid by the back of the neck, and without thinking, headbutted him. Once he started to cry, I pulled him in and told him that if he ever lays a hand on that little boy again, I'd break every last one of his sad little bones. I never told anyone about doing that. After school, I watched my brother begin to walk home, and the little friend walked up to him, yelled something about some dumb older girl. I can only assume he meant me, and he pushed my brother into the street, and a car had to slam on its brake to avoid hitting him. At that point, I lost it. I pulled my brother onto the sidewalk and made sure he was okay, and I told him not to move. I ran over to the little I didn't care that he was younger, not one bit, grabbed him by his hair, and yanked him to the ground and started beating the ever-loving crap out of him. At some point, I broke his arm. The driver of the car that almost hit my brother had called the police and pulled me off of him, but backed me up 100% and told the officer the truth about what he saw. I got insanely lucky. The police officer told me he has a little sister with autism, and he probably would have done the same thing. Didn't even get punished in the slightest, was just told to take my brother home and to promise never to hit anyone again. The best I could give was to never get caught hitting anyone again. We stopped by the 7-Eleven on the way home, and I got us both some ice cream. I don't know if he remembers that day now, but I'd still do it all over again in a heartbeat. You did the right thing. I can't think of anything better to do than that. This one feels like one of those stereotypical bully situations you see in movies, but this one had a much better outcome and justice justice was actually served. The kid wouldn't have stopped if you didn't step in, so kudos. I framed my mother's ex-husband when I was 5. So for a little background, my mom's ex-husband was a jerk. Later on in life, I found out that he was even worse than I thought, but even to 5-year-old me, he was a jerk. For example, there was one summer where he spent all of our money, meaning his and the money from the 3 jobs my mom worked at the time, on cigarettes and booze and other dumb stuff, leading to me and my sister having to spend the summer at my grandma's house because there was literally no food in the house and my mom had to live off of bread and butter for about 3 months. He was that kind of guy. So when I was a kid, I always got up much earlier than everyone else. I can't remember why, but it was probably just so I could watch cartoons in peace. One morning, I went into the living room and found this dude's pocket knife on the couch. It was closed, but I got curious. I opened it and I was playing with it when I had the thought. Obviously, I can't remember the actual train of thought, but it led to me deciding to cut my hand right in the center of my palm so that mom would be mad at Meathead McDonald. I immediately started bleeding, and a lot. Now I know that I bled so much because I have a blood clotting disorder, yay me. I started screaming, mom came down the stairs along with wipe, and they saw what happened. I told mom that he had let the knife open on the couch arm, and I had put my hand down on accident. This led to one of their biggest fights, with mom saying that he was endangering me, and micro saying he swore he didn't leave it open. So yeah, I still have that lovely scar in the middle of my hand to remind me that I was more of an evil genius when I was a child than I ever will be again. Fun. I love how in every paragraph you have a different name for him. Your hatred for this man is so great, you have to make a new name for every time. Poetic. You did leave a knife out where a 5-year-old could get it. This did endanger you. You single-handedly, sorry about the pun, won your mother's custody over you when you were 5, and before the divorce even started. You evil mastermind. Bro is a genius at 5. Bro knows what's good. I used to eat my coworker's apple chips at work, then tell him I was allergic to apples so he wouldn't accuse me. Well, this guy just seems kind of like a jerk. Just to be clear, this wasn't because I was particularly hungry. It's because my coworker was an absolute a-hole. He was really creepy towards the girls in the office. Immediately, I take back what I just said about him being a jerk. Good for them. And always said some pretty weirdly racist stuff to our other coworker who was from Mexico. He was just a crude, horribly annoying person who seemingly took enjoyment out of making everyone around him uncomfortable. He was like a mix of Todd Packer from The Office and Tony Soprano. He always brought these apple chips into work to eat for lunch, and occasionally I would go in, take the apple chips, and go to the nearby park and eat them for lunch. He would go around asking if anyone took the chips and would act all pissed off because he knew someone took them. Instead of just flat out telling him I'm allergic to apples, I put on a little show. He was eating his chips 2 days before and I started to take them, and I asked if I could have one, and I took one and almost took a bite, and then he said, "These aren't apple flavored, are they?" And he said they were, and then I quickly put it back on the plate and went to go wash my hands because I said I was allergic. Much more believable than me just flat out telling him. This went on for about 2 months, and I must have taken his chips like 10 times or so. 2000 IQ. You're living in 3019. You deserve a round of applause. Hey, you know what? I said that you were being a jerk. I lied. I apologize. That guy who's being weird to girls and racist deserves to have his apple chips eaten, at the very least. I took a dump in a mason jar and left it in my friend's pantry. About 13 years ago, my 19-year-old self was partying at a friend's house, and there was a good 20 to 25 people packed inside this 1,000 square foot house. I have been drinking Mike's Hard Lemonade and tampon blender benders all night long. Full disclosure, I have an allergy involving certain alcohols that can cause severe hives, swollen throat, and intense diarrhea. I was 19 and stupid. Anyways, I was chatting with my gal pal at the time and felt the inevitable groan in my stomach. Ah, crap, I thought, figuratively and literally. I asked where the bathroom was, and she pointed down the hall. I squeezed myself through the teenage crowd only to find a ridiculously long line of women waiting to use the toilet. My bowels were screaming. The cramps were intensifying. I recalled seeing a toilet closet in the basement of the house once before and decided to take my chances. I darted down the stairs, all while puckering my pooper with all the strength in me. It was dark, so I flipped the light switch and saw the porcelain throne glowing in the corner of the room. I slammed the door behind me and shoved my pants down around my ankles. I make a swift penguin waddle over to the toilet. To my surprise, the toilet isn't connected to the plumbing, it's just sitting in the corner of the room. A failed attempt at a bathroom remodel. I put myself in a perilous poo position with no escape. People saw me come down here, and there's no way I could go poo in the toilet and get away with it. But now, my ass was on fire and I could barely hold it much longer. I panicked. I scanned the room and noticed an open mason jar filled with potpourri with a lid lying beside it on a shelf. My mind was made up. I snatched the mason jar from the shelf and promptly dumped the potpourri into the empty toilet bowl. Ever so carefully, I placed the mason jar on the floor of the bathroom and popped a squat over it, spreading my cheeks, and with surgical precision, shat my brains out in the jar. I filled that sucker to the brim. I released the crack into size and never felt such relief before in my life. But what now? What do I do now? I can't leave it here. I hear my friends calling me from upstairs that they were wanting to leave. I needed an escape plan now. Quickly, I pulled up my pants. Wiping was not an option, but I'd pinched off like 99% of my crap, so it was clean enough, and I placed the lid on the mason jar. It was warm. So warm. Still unsure of what to do next. I hid the jar under my hoodie and exited the bathroom as if nothing happened. "What were you doing down there?" my friend asked. "Just freshening up," I said in absolute horror that she may notice my mason jar smuggling. "Hurry up, we're all in the kitchen waiting to leave," she barks. I swim through the crowd of people to the kitchen to meet my friends. They're all crowded around the pantry door, which was next to the garage. "There you are," they holler as they open the door to the garage. "Here's my chance." The door to the garage was blocking the visual to the pantry. I did it. I slid the smuggled poop jar out from under my sweater and placed it next to the identical jars in the pantry and promptly left. To this day, I wonder with so much wonderment that I wonder how I've never been caught. Did they ever locate this jar and open it? Was it assumed beef stew? Was it tasted? I'm good. Smelled, tossed. I regret this, but I was desperate. This is my poofession. Somewhere at some time on Reddit, someone is sharing the discovery of that poop jar. I hope these stories will find their way to each other. That jar might have exploded, especially if it got hot outside. Poop creates methane gas, and you might have poop bombed their pantry. I knowingly stuck a booger to my boss's hand and let a customer get blamed for it. A few years ago, I was a salesman for a tool company, and as I'm sure you all know, salespeople shake hands all the time when closing a deal. One day on my lunch break, I was sitting in my car eating a salad, and for some reason, I felt like a hard, dried snot stuck in my nostril. So obviously, I didn't think anybody was around or watching me, so I went and dug for gold. Well, as soon as I pulled the giant flaky booger with a snail trail of slime on it, my boss, who had just got back from vacation, and bops the hood of my car and reaches in for a handshake. I kind of panicked and just shook his hand. We talked for a few about his vacation, and then he saw somebody walk into the showroom, so he went in the building. I finished up lunch and headed back into work. I punch back in and hear from the showroom, "What the frick?" And then I hear gagging and coughing. My boss is holding his hand away like it's a dirty diaper. He's dry heaving and he says, "That guy just wiped a frickin' booger on me." And I look across the room and see this old guy standing there in total disbelief, and he let my boss have it. He's telling my boss that he's never coming back, told him to stop picking his nose like a window licker, and a few other colorful sentences. My boss kicks him out. While this whole thing is going down, all I can think to myself is, holy crap, I got away with it. I just drove by my old work and thought about that time and figured it was time to confess. This is quality content right here. That's it, you're going to hell. Hope you pack your bags, lol. You might think this is a good confession, but it's snot. I ordered $80 worth of pizza for a non-existent client. It was a family business and they were very mean and have no patience. I ordered a delivery, it came 1 hour later and cold. Called him out about it. Dude got mad, started yelling and refused to take it back. He threw the change at me and stormed away. I called his father, the pizza owner, to complain, and he told me that his kid don't get mad if he wasn't right, and he told me to put the pizza in the microwave and hung up. I was mad AF. I decided to wait until I cool off and think about what to do. So the next morning I called the pizza from a phone booth and ordered almost $80 worth of pizza. I gave them the address of the apartment next to me, which was empty. I turned off my TV so I can hear him coming. He came more than an hour later and started knocking on the door. Of course no one responded. He insisted by knocking loudly. So I opened my door and see him with a ton of pizza. I just laughed and closed my door. He automatically knew it was me, but couldn't prove it. I could hear him yelling, insulting while leaving the building. That day was satisfying AF. I ordered Domino's to celebrate. You should have been eating Domino's pizza when you opened the door to look at him, but awesome either way. Gotta love the petty revenge in this one. +1 for opening the door to watch him steam. You're kind. I would have kept on doing that constantly until it affected the way they treated all their customers, thus putting them out of business. How's a small business pizza place gonna have that kind of attitude for customers? Like, unfortunately, you kind of would expect it from a bigger chain who, they have plenty of money and don't care. But the small places? I don't know, man. How are places like that still in business? I stole a book from the library page by page, then glued the pieces together at home. I was about 10 and I was addicted to reading encyclopedias. I could spend hours learning about all sorts of stuff, staring at the illustrations and photos, and of course smelling the books. Smelling? However, I could get my fix at my local library only as my parents could barely afford food for us, let alone buying fancy books. So I became a regular guest at the kids/teenagers section of the library. One day I couldn't get there in time, so I only had about half an hour to spend before closing time. Not just that, but they also had a brand new 400-page encyclopedia waiting for me on the shelf. It was love at first sight. I felt awful because I knew that I couldn't do much reading in such little time, and then there was this lovely smelling book with a montage of astronauts, cars, and magnificent landscapes on the cover, just begging me to read it. But sadly, books like those were not borrowable and time was ticking. I thought about taking it, but it was just enormous and I wasn't. I wasn't a bad boy either, I told myself, but what if I just take a few pages? That surely won't hurt anyone and no one will notice. That's what I did. The book was binded in a way that I could carefully rip out about 5 pages out in one go. I wrapped the pages around my foot, slipped them in my socks, covered my socks with my pants, and I just casually walked out. The first time I actually said thank you very much with a big smile to the librarian, and she gave me that awkward, what the heck are you talking about look. My 10-year-old mind quickly realized how stupid I was to say that, and I, maybe even my parents, could be in jail for this. So I just rushed out, sweating, and with my heart jumping out of my chest. Originally, I wanted to return the pages at the next visit to the library, but I was sitting on my bed at home, reading about the wildlife in Africa, the only content I got at the time. I came up with the master plan of repeating the process until I got every page, and the plan was working. Not just that, but I improved on the technique. I wrapped pages around my feet, around my arms, I had to wear long sleeves for that, and also kept a stack on my back, tucked carefully in my pants. I can get about 20 to 25 pages in just one day, and I remember walking slowly like a robot on my way out, as I didn't want to crush the pages too much. I couldn't bend in any direction because the pages were holding my limbs tight. After several visits to the library, the encyclopedia began to visibly shrink, so I got some paper from the photocopy room and replaced them as replacing pages with blank ones. My last visit was the sketchiest because I had to take the trophy somehow. By trophy, I mean the hardcover with the astronauts on it. There was no way to wrap it like I did with the other pages, and it was too big to hide it anywhere on me. But I was so close to the victory and I couldn't let it go. I had the shiny cover in its full glory in my hand. I put it under my t-shirt, on my back, hands in my pockets, trying to hold the cover with my elbows. I was scared to the bone that they will catch me and send me to jail. I checked my reflection in the window, but it looked like a terrifying Lady Gaga with a fake shoulder pad. But I was also shameless by this time, and I knew I was an awful person. It was nearly 5 o'clock, and every library goer left. The librarians were doing their closing up routine, so the front desk was abandoned. I just walked out without anyone noticing me. I glued all the pages and the cover together at home. The book was nowhere near as majestic as before, but I loved it anyway. I have never stolen anything else in my life, and I'm so sorry for this. Later heists include stealing the Mona Lisa in a similar way, yes? In a similar way? I don't know about that one. God dang, dude, that's a hella plan for a young child. Steal the moon! I stole a girl's iPod Touch and then sold it back to her a month later. It's 2011, I'm in year 7, it's my first year in high school, and I got sent somewhere where I literally only knew one person, and we never spoke. A few months into the year, I'm sitting in math class, and this one girl who I just could not stand, and who also bullied me on and off, kept just interrupting for the stupidest of things, and just generally kept getting on my nerves the whole lesson. Partway through the lesson, the teacher tells us to leave our things in the classroom so we can go to the computer lab, and I was the last to leave the classroom. Note that most kids hid their iPods under their pencil cases during class so they can get away with using it, and I knew for a fact she'd left it there. I don't know what possessed me to steal her iPod, but I did, and she never found out. But now I leave school. The iPod is still in my shorts pockets, but nobody knows what I've done. The girl thinks one of the guys was screwing with her and doesn't suspect me at all. Now, the one defining feature of her iPod was that the back was completely covered in small circle stickers. Once it had gotten so worn down, they'd almost fused with the device. So I did what I could and scrubbed those frickers off until it looked brand new. I didn't use it at all in fear from my mom seeing it and screaming at me for being a thief. So I just sat in my room gathering dust until about a month later, I overhear her asking some people if they know about anyone selling an iPod. 1 week later, and I made $150 by selling a girl her own iPod that had just been factory reset and scrubbed down. Now that is what we call a pro gamer move. Serial number would have been the same, too bad she didn't notice. Oh, aren't you a frickin' fun at parties, Knack 74? Actually, the serial number's the same. Shut up! It was funny. My friend and I lowered our GPA and broke into the teacher's lounge because we were thirsty. I really like soda, and around 5 years ago, my friend and I were high school freshmen. We were really poor, but we still both would scrounge up change to buy a soda every now and then. The recent healthy lifestyle thing schools were doing, all the soda vending machines were removed. For a while, we were really upset. However, I walked by a teacher's lounge one day while a teacher had the door open and saw that there was a Coke vending machine still in there. Not only that, but the price of a single bottle was only 50 cents. That was an outright steal to us. We knew we had to get in there. The problem was the door was constantly locked. We began creating our plan. During lunch hour, we scoped out the normal high school building. Since it was lunch, all students were required to be in the cafeteria. However, we knew a way to have access to the building was to get lunch detention. Kids in detention were released 20 minutes late for lunch. The easiest way to do that was to not turn in biology worksheets. 3 zeros in biology, and a few late lunches later, we found out that one of the teachers would leave a key in the door for easy access. On the 4th day, we put our plan into action. B would watch the door as I slipped into the lounge after teachers had gotten their lunch, and I made my way to the machine with $1 in quarters. On the way, I noticed a bowl in the corner labeled Soda Fund with lots of change and dollar bills inside. Reed took over me that day, and we ran out of the school with 3 sodas each. We did this at least 4 more times through the semester. We had to stop after the school installed security cameras, and eventually the cheap soda machine was removed. Overall, our average biology score dropped nearly 15 points, but the sodas tasted really good. Reading this was like watching a heist movie. I thought you meant thirsty as in horny. Bro? What? A small price to pay for satiation. I forged Good Charlotte's signature for a Nintendo. When I was 8, there was a boy in my 3rd grade class who was obsessed with the band Good Charlotte, and he had this blue Nintendo Game Boy that I've been eyeing for a while, and I decided to propose a trade. I told him that I actually knew Benji and Joe Madden, lead singers of the band, and I had their autographs. I told him I traded the autographs for his Game Boy, and he enthusiastically agreed. I went home and spent a good 20 to 30 minutes with my next door neighbor forging their signatures. After we agreed on one, we used her parents' lamination machine to make it really legit. The next day, he handed over his Game Boy in return for the fake autographs. A week later, my little brother was playing with the Game Boy and dropped it in the bathtub. Well, karma, I guess. Benji and Cameron are regulars of mine at my coffee shop. I'm excited to tell them this story. I'll send you a Game Boy if you get me their autograph. Heist of the century. You did that at 8? You deserve the Game Boy, you creative bastard. Son, I've been reading your Reddit posts. Son, you just graduated with top grades from a tough engineering program, and you've got your dream job lined up. So I thought it was time I fessed up. I've been reading your Reddit posts since you were a sophomore in high school. I know you think I don't even know what Reddit is. I may be over 50, but as you're learning, parents aren't really that oblivious. The Secret Santa gift you received years ago that you thought I didn't notice showed your account name. Ever since I watched your account, so when I saw some comment about being down or unhappy, Mom and I tried harder to make sure you knew we loved you, and we're sure everything would work out. Teenage years can be tough. I'm proud of what you've accomplished and see the mature, confident, capable young man you've become. So no need to change your account name now. I don't feel the need to watch over you in the same way I did years ago, and I promise to stop reading your posts. So what weird plan is your son into? Dad invades his son privacy. Then his story invades my heart. Mad tears, bro. That's a heartwarming invasion of privacy. I don't know whether you're an awesome dad or a huge dick. I used to throw out food, so Mom had to cook again. When I was a kid, I used to live alone with my mother. She always cooked more than necessary at lunch, so she don't need to cook again for dinner. Food usually was enough even for the next day lunch, and I hated this. In my mind, there was no need for that. She was just lazy. I threw out the food, so she had to cook a new one. This lasts for a month or so. Obviously, she realized what I was doing, but never said a word. She just took the hint and cooked less. Looking back, she was so busy. Single mother having to take care of a child and work at the same time. Honestly, this is not something I cared that much until last week when she died and everything came back. All that stuff that I've done in the past that made our life difficult. If it had been more than a mild inconvenience, I'm sure she would have said something about it. You were a child. Find comfort in knowing that these were things she would laugh about when sharing with friends and family and coworkers. Sheesh. I don't feel like cooking 80% of the time. Lamau. I stopped attending a class, lied about turning in the final, and still passed. Back in my junior year of college, I took a class with a professor that I really did not like. He was so disorganized, absent-minded, and really didn't teach anything. The kind of professor that tells you to watch YouTube videos instead of actually teaching you the subject. It took him weeks to grade anything, and I don't even think he read them. It seemed like he was just coasting until retirement. Anyway, I flew out to see my grandma 1 week for her 90th birthday, and I missed a few classes and missed a few YouTube lessons. Well, the following week, my grandma passed, so I flew back out for her funeral, in turn missing a few more classes. I was really far behind and really had no clue what we were working on, flunked the midterm, and missed the big project. At this point, I just gave up and reserved myself to failure and retake it in the summer, and I didn't show up to any other classes. At the end of the semester, he emailed me regarding the final project and final test. He congratulated me on a great job with the group project. Really weird since I hadn't been to class in months and he was definitely not part of the group project. He was also wondering if I had turned in the final paper. I emailed him back and told him how happy I was that he enjoyed the project and I had definitely turned in the paper. Well, I don't know if he wanted to cover his tracks and pretend he didn't lose my test or whether he didn't give a crap about it, but when I checked my final grade for the semester, I had passed with a high C. I do not regret it at all. He was a horrible professor and a total slob. Freaking amazing. C's get degrees, even from slobs on the job. Deception 100. Bro didn't even try. Bro didn't even try to deceive. He just did. He's got deception 500, bro.